Assalamu alaikum. We're joined today by Dilly Hussain. Brother Dilly is a podcaster, a pundit, and a journalist. I have known him as a journalist, but in recent years, Alhamdulillah, his podcast, the Blood Brothers podcast, has been is an inspirational not only for Muslims in the West, but as well as the Muslims in their home countries in the global South, as we would say. And we've been honored by Brother Dilly coming on to discuss the situation in Bangladesh, but also the situation in Palestine and in the Muslim world at large. Where we're dealing with a lot of different crises: identity, gender and sex, a general political crisis across the world in the Muslim world. Um, Brother Dilly, how are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you, my dear
Wow.
brother?
I'm perfectly well, alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair for having me on. The honor is
Yeah.
mine. And I also believe that you are the contributor to the same cause that your brothers in Western diaspora communities are, and that's the awakening of this ummah. And we're all contributing in different ways. And the very fact that a sizable uh, Islamic channel in Pakistan, is hosting someone to talk about Bangladesh, formerly East Pakistan, is something which would be appreciated by your brothers in the East, for sure.
No, I'm very glad to hear that. We were speaking about earlier about how a reconciliation between the two brothers would look like, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and what would be the steps appropriate. And I think the first step is to understand Bangladesh. As I mentioned earlier before the podcast started, there's been a purposeful sort of attempt in academia, in literature and film, where Pakistanis in general have been detached from Bangladeshi culture, from food, the clothes, the music, the whole 9 yards. And I'm afraid that we wake up one morning and we find that there's student protests across Bangladesh, and then the military's been called in, and there's martial law, and then the Jamaat Islami has been banned. For us, it seems that it's all very abrupt, but I suspect that it's been something brewing for a while now. It's been a long time coming.
For sure. I mean, just on one note, just for something for the viewers, I'm curious to know how many Pakistanis are aware that the very notion, the very idea of Pakistan was actually born in Bengal. The Islam, the early thinkers and founders of the Muslim League and what was going to be Pakistan. Many of the thinkers and pioneers were from the Bengal region.
Yes.
The movement of the cause was one. With regards to the current events, which is primarily why you invited me on today, is that we have witnessed for the last 2 to 3 weeks a brutal, violent crackdown on student protesters, which began in Dhaka and has spread across the country. Whilst the nucleus of the activities of recent events is Dhaka, was Barisal, Rajshahi, Bogra, Chittagong, and other areas have been affected. Just some important statistical demographics. I believe Pakistan's population is 210 million, something around.
Something to that effect, yes.
Yeah, so Bangladesh is 175 million. And we're a country that's, I believe, 4.5 times smaller than Pakistan, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. So, one of the most densely populated countries in the world. Dhaka itself is like the fourth or fifth most populated cities in the world. Why I'm giving you these numbers is because when we talk about what the students began protesting about, which is the student quota system, right? You'll understand that there is already a huge disparity, right? And I'm very confident that many Pakistanis will be listening to what I'm saying today and will relate and will connect and will pretty much think, oh, he's describing more or less the situation here, socioeconomic, meaning the aesthetics of life for the everyday awam people. Yeah? We're talking about day-to-day, high to low level corruption at every aspect of society. I mean, you can't get things progressed without a bribe. Yeah? We're talking about political violence and thuggery up and down the very infrastructure of the state. We are talking about, amidst all of this, a nation that has been under a one-party state for the last 15 years.
And what about Bangladesh?
This is what I'm talking about. And that's exactly what I mean. I just described Bangladesh, and you could have easily thought Dilly is describing Pakistan here. So Hasina has been in power, Sheikh Hasina, who is the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Bandaba, the founding father of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, the leader of the Awami League, the secular, ardently secular, pro-India Awami League party. There is no political opposition, formally anyway. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, has boycotted elections since 2014, and Jamaat-e-Islam most recently have now been banned. But even before that, they had to be deregulated, so they couldn't participate formally in general elections. So Bangladesh has been under a one-party state for the best part of 15 years. And amidst this, students have taken to the streets in early July because they protested against the reinstatement of the quota system. Now, in simple terms, the quota system is a law or a policy that has been in place and it is as old as Bangladesh. It was introduced to provide employment opportunities within the civil service, as well as the private sector, for underrepresented and discriminated minorities. So it would be like 10% for women, 10% from districts based on their populations and their infrastructure. I believe 5% for ethnic minorities and religious minorities, 1% for the disabled. But the largest portion of this quota system, that is the most contentious part, is the 30% that was allocated to the liberation fighters and their family members. So I want to just put this into perspective.
Right.
54 to 56% of all civil service jobs are taken up by that breakdown of groups, 30% of which are freedom fighters and their relatives and their descendants. They will get those civil service jobs. That is a huge chunk, right? And not only that, there is the whole issue about how this 30% is weaponized and has been used for fraudulent access for Awami League loyalists. So it's not even the case. So it's not.
Just a quick interruption. Is it true that 30% represents less than 1% of the population? Like there's this rumor, right? Is it that bad?
It's that bad, but the point here is that the 30% is not even going to the freedom fighters and their descendants. What's happening is that there's been fraudulent certificates made. So for you to access these jobs, for you to progress within the quota system, you need to have this certificate, which is called a freedom fighter certificate. This proves that you come from the lineage or a direct descendant of someone who fought against West Pakistan in 1971. What Awami League did was mass produce fraudulent certificates, which then was either signed off by Awami League ministers and people in high office and or distributed to their loyalists. It is one of the ways in which the regime preserves its control over the apparatus of the state, from the media to telecoms to domestic policy, fiscal policy, employment, all of it. Every aspect of the government bodies within Bangladesh would have loyalists as a result of the abuse of this 30% quota for loyalists, for freedom fighters. So just to give you a quick chronology, that's what we're dealing with. Now, in 2018, the quota system was actually revoked as a result of popular protests. In 2018, after nearly 47 years, the quota system was repealed and it no longer existed. What sparked the recent protests is that in June the 5th this year, it was reinstated. It was reinstated. So after 6 years, the quota system was reinstated, which led to peaceful protests in 6 universities in Dhaka, mainly Dhaka University and Jahangirnagar University, but another 6 peacefully protested in Dhaka against the reinstatement of the quota system, saying that this was unfair, unjust, it favors Awami League loyalists. Even associations of freedom fighters came out and said, we also believe this is unjust. This 30% is too high. It should be based on merit and competency. It shouldn't be going to our relatives and our descendants. But also, we are telling you, as actual liberation fighters and the descendants of liberation fighters, that we are not actually getting these jobs. That actually these jobs are going to Awami League loyalists. So, peaceful protests began in the beginning of June, 7th of July, 6 universities in Dhaka. Things escalated when Prime Minister Sheikh Hussain went onto the media and said, with regards to those protesting, Who do you expect to get these privileges? The Rajakars? If the freedom fighters don't get it, who should get it? The Razakars, right? Now, Rajakar or Razakar basically means those who sided with West Pakistan, those who didn't want an independent Bangladesh.
Razakar. Yeah, in Urdu you would call Razakar.
Yeah, now whether for ideological reasons, political reasons, religious reasons, socioeconomic reasons, for whatever reasons, those who did not want to see Bangladesh and sided with Pakistan, they have been bastardized as Razakars, as in outright sellouts, traitors, those who had loyalties and colluded with the oppressors from West Pakistan military.
So is that like a subtle jab towards Al Badr and Al Shams and people like from Jamaat Islami? Is that like sort of a
They're not jabs; those are uppercuts and left-right hooks. They're not jabs, but it's more to do with the fact that how Hasina politicizes and has weaponized this terminology to discredit any opposition against her policies, whether it's secular or Islamic. So that really, really angered the student protesters. How dare the Prime Minister of this country equates our cause and labels us as a Razakar? That's why you're seeing some videos of student protesters chanting "Tumi khair, ami khair, Razakar, Tumi khair, ami khair, Razakar." That they are mockingly saying to her that is this what we've come to? Now, us calling upon something very basic as access to civil service job as graduates, you have now basically tarnished us as a Razakar. So basically saying that our cause is one that is against the goodness of this state. And Razakar is the term that Hasina and Awami League loyalists use to question one's loyalty to their country, one's loyalty to the goodness and the benefit of Bangladesh. Someone who's a Razakar doesn't care for Bangladesh. He has more, he's seen someone who is religiously zealous, someone who wants to introduce religion in politics, someone who wants to resort back to the occupation of Pakistan. So these kind of things are tarnished. Yes, it generally describes Jamaati Islam, but broadly speaking, it applies to any politically active Muslims or part of any politically active Islamic groups or movements. And even broadly speaking, she uses it carte blanche against anyone who opposes it, including BNP, including the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. So that's the backdrop. That's the context. For 47 years, there was a thing called the quota system. In 2018, it was repealed and revoked. In June this year, it was reinstated. There was peaceful protests at the beginning of July. 14th of July is when things really escalated, when Prime Minister Hasina described the protesters as such, as Razakars, basically saying, if you're fighting against the liberation fighters' descendants receiving these benefits, who do you want it for? The Razakars?
Couple of questions.
Go on, go for it.
Are these protesters, are they in principle opposed to the idea of quota systems, or is it the practical misuse of the quota systems? Is it a debate over the percentage, or is it a spectrum of ideas? Like what are the demographics? What is the makeup of the protesters? What do they look like?
I would say the main call or the overwhelming sentiment of the student protests is either revocation or the entire quota system to come down to 5%.
Right. So there's a compromise point where they're willing to accept.
Yeah, but that margin isn't really that large. If you think about what's the difference between like 2018 revocation, where there is no more quota system, or that there should be 5% for those who the state deems are underrepresented or discriminated. I don't think there's anyone that says it should be 30, 40, 50, or it should be 20, 25. At the moment, 54 to 56% is taken to these groups, of which 30% is liberation fighters and their descendants and their relatives. The discussion now is revocation. The court system needs to be disbanded, just like it was in 2018. And if there is going to be a compromise, then it would have to be 5%.
Would you describe these students, would you characterize them as religious zealots, as non-partisan, and it's a mix of the left and the right, would you say? Just general center people from the center?
From my observations, I have seen people of various political leanings and persuasions, as well as religious. For sure, there have been Islamic chants. Why wouldn't there? Whenever Muslims are being oppressed, who do they call out to? They call out to Allah, right? So that shouldn't come out as oh, this means the student protests are Islamic, well, they're Muslim. So, of course, they're going to call out to Allah and at times of oppression. But I've also seen students that appear to be somewhat secular, somewhat liberal, somewhat left-leaning, at least outwardly, aesthetically don't appear to be religious, right? I think the opposition and the Union of Students, the anti-discrimination students movement, what is what they're formally called, is a mix. They're a mixed bunch. I think it would be unfair to describe them as mostly or entirely religiously conservative or traditional. I also believe it would be incorrect to say that they are largely secular. I think they are mixed because it affects students of all walks and life, of all persuasions and stripes. Because if you're not an Awami loyalist, that leaves the breadth of Bangladeshi society to be disadvantaged by this policy and the misuse of it.
Right, that's a fair point. But then is Jamaat Islami just like the whipping boy and it's like a scapegoat? That's why they all that's always the fall to like the default position in Bangladesh for the established regime I've seen is to punish Jamaat Islami leadership, with the famous hangings, with them being disbanded, and now they're being banned. Is that like a scapegoat maneuver, or is that something where they authentically feel like that is the nucleus of this movement?
The 100% conclusivity of what the Hasina government believes Jamaat Islam in terms of a threat to her kursi, we will never know exactly where they are in the pecking order. What we do know is that it doesn't take much for Hasina's kursi to be rattled. Right. It doesn't take right. much of a threat for her to come down with a heavy hand with all the armed apparatuses of the Bangladeshi state, whether it be the police, the border brigadiers, the army, RAB, the Rapid Action Battalion Forces, the NSI, which is the equivalent of your ISI, I believe, or at least the domestic intelligence services. It doesn't take much for her to, bring them out on the streets, which we have seen, and let's talk about some of the numbers, because I think this is also important on the law. The official number is somewhere shy of 250, nearing 300 deaths. Yeah. The actual number is widely believed to have surpassed 1,000 now. So we're kind of averaging around 70 to 100 deaths a day since July the 14th. Yeah. So we are seeing people that are being kidnapped and abducted from hospitals, students, but as well as teachers, civilians, independent bloggers. We are seeing plainclothes thugs, the Chatra League, right, who have a huge,
which is the youth league of the Awami League, which is like the youth wing.
Yes, so I don't know the extent of this in Pakistan, right? I don't know how powerful PPP or Muslim League or like MQ. I don't know how influential their student groups are in universities, as well as. Yeah, but as well as everyday crime in the area, like it's also part of organized.
They used to be. They got banned. They got banned in Pakistan. So when you join a Pakistani university, you sign an affidavit which states that I have no political affiliations and essentially I have no political outlooks whatsoever.
Very interesting. One of the 9 demands of the Students Against Discrimination movement is that there should be no partisan activism or politics on university campuses.
Yeah, we had a big problem with that. Yeah, the gangs, the violence, all of that.
Because not only are they students of universities and will be future civil service workers, they are also criminals. They are actually gunde. Yes, and I'm not saying that Chatra Dal, which is the student wing of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or even Chatra Shibir, which is the student wing of Jamaat Islam, are shy of their own kind of madness and political violence on campuses and so forth. But Chatra League of the Awami League are basically the equivalent of Bashar al-Assad Shabiha. And anyone who has any exposure to the Syrian civil war and know the role of the Shabiha, that what they did for the Assad regime, the Chatra League are no different to that. These are people who kill, kidnap, extort, racketeer, abduct, hold people ransom. They reign with terror and fear. They bully and intimidate teachers and students alike. They ensure that there is no mobilization of any opposition to government policies. They ensure that that people keep things hush and quiet, whether they are secular or Islamic. And one of the common ways in which they discredit any opposition, they're Jamaati, they're Razakars, and so forth.
Right.
At the moment, we've got more than 1,000 dead. There are random roadside graves propping up in Dhaka. People are being killed and abducted in the night for them to be buried and being found roadside in the day. The main perpetrators are the police and the Chatra League loyalists and thugs who are armed and have the protection of the police. But there are also army officers, rapid action battalion forces. You're using lethal force against an entirely unarmed student protest population. And those who have sticks or anything, this is purely defensive at this point. We have to also make note that more than 8,000 arrests have been made, possibly more than that. Yeah. And thousands more severely injured. Hospitals are under occupation of these Awami League loyalists who are now being threatened that they cannot reveal the actual stats and data of how many have been killed and injured in their hospitals. Patient records are being burnt and destroyed. Internet was cut for 6 days flat out just more than a week ago. This is when the most of the murders and killings were done. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing that this has been the worst violence that Bangladesh has seen for an amount of years. And it is shocking because of the brutality that Hussain has come down upon against a movement that is neither controlled or neither heavily influenced by her main opposition party or what remains of them.
Just a quick question. What is the population demographic like in Bangladesh? We have a 65% youth bulge, which is people below the age of 30 in Pakistan. Is there a similar situation in Bangladesh?
Yes, high youth population.
50 to upwards of 50-60%?
Yes, more for sure, 100%.
All right, and I suspect that what I've heard is what I've understood is that a lot of the manufacturing is leaving Bangladesh, so there's not a lot of private sector work. That's why these government jobs are very coveted.
Bangladesh differs not that much to Pakistan and other of its Muslim counterparts in the developing world or global south or whatever terms you want to use to coin your motherland in. It is part of the ummatic brain drain, right? That the best of that Bangladesh has to offer is there's nothing worth remaining for them to stay in that country. There's no opportunities for them. And these civil service jobs are not just civil service jobs. These are very beneficial jobs that will give you pensions and will benefit you and your family for generations to come, which has been the case. Once you land yourself in the quota system and within the quota system, you will be benefiting for many, many, many years and generations. That's why the fraudulent production of liberation fighter, freedom fighter certificates was endemic in the last 15 years. Now, some would be asking, how has Hussain and the Awami League managed to be in power pretty much unopposed for the last 15 years?
That was the next question.
So let's talk about a bit of chronology here, right? Prior to her coming to power in 2008, early 2009, there was a mix and match of military caretaker governments as well as BNP. BNP has enjoyed a handful of terms, especially under Khaleda Zia's husband, Major Zia, under his rule, yeah?
Yeah, we've both had some Zias. I'm fully aware of the, yeah.
Yes, we both had Zia. So our Zia is the husband of Khaleda Zia, the current leader or the former leader of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party.
Is that more of a socialist style secular nationalist party or just more of the same as Hussain?
I would maybe say a tad towards the populist nationalist. They are certainly in their rhetoric less pro-India. Doesn't mean they're not pro-India, although they don't continue the policies of their predecessors from the Awami League. But for sure, the rhetoric, the posturing, is one that is less pro-India and more pro-independent, and even in private circles, perhaps more warm and forgiving of Pakistan, right?
Oh, wow.
But nevertheless, still secular nationalists, still very much have continued the legacies of their predecessors pretty much in terms of its dependency and its role as a vassal state of India. I know many Bangladeshis may not like to admit this, but we've reached a point that we have to acknowledge this. we are a vassal state of India. We are a vassal state of India. And that's been the case because the policies that have been imposed and enacted by successive leaders of Bangladesh have created a mindset that we have to be entirely or mostly dependent and reliant on India.
Yeah, I mean there's almost like even a flesh trade where thousands of people are smuggled into India for menial labor and all kinds of horrible. It's a cheap labor market for India. It's resources rich. It's ridiculous.
And I don't want to kind of delve into this too much because this may be a podcast for us on another day. But let's be honest about it. The biggest benefactors of the events of 1971, putting aside the grievances and the many grievances and the horrific crimes that took place, the biggest benefactor was India. It was
Yes.
Hindu majority India. I mean, you'd have to be stupid to argue otherwise. I mean, they admit it pretty much to have a Muslim majority Islamically inclined Pakistani's east and western flank, or two Muslim majority Islamically inclined states in the east and western flank, was a geopolitical and military nightmare for India. So there is also this kind of dependency, this mindset that India helped us in 71, so therefore we will forever be indebted to them. And this kind of trickles down amongst Awami League loyalists, as well as what Hasina attempts to do through popular culture and media representations, is that India is the older brother that intervened and helped us against who should have been our brothers, but actually oppressed us and occupied us and raped our women and killed our intellectuals and so forth. So she perpetuates this, and so this is what the zakr means. So you can imagine why the students were so angered when they were called this. Because to call it a Bangladeshi that, let alone your prime minister calling that, is them basically saying you are traitors, you likening you to treason, that your cause, the quota system and its revocation is something that she equates to that. So Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Jamaat-e-Islam are the main political opposition of Awami League. The Jamaat-e-Islam, ironically, have also shared parliamentary positions under Awami League governments. There's been short-term alliances between Awami League and Jamaat-e-Islam. I think one of the sad stories of Jamaat-e-Islam in the Indian subcontinent is not that different to their Arab counterparts in the Arab world, is that it began as a pure movement of blessed thinkers. May Allah have mercy on all the founding fathers of that thinking and that movement, from Hassan al-Banna to Maududi to Sayyid Qutb, to everyone in between who established this type of thinking, right, for Islamic revival. And then what happened when they kind of entered the kind of pragmatic arena of secular democratic politics, right, with good intentions. And those arguments could even be presented to and can very much validly be applied to PTI and Imran Khan supporters, right?
I'll just put a little pin in that for a second. We'll get back to PTI. We'll circle back to PTI.
Yeah, but very much less so. I'm not equating it to that, but very much less so.
I don't think it's a fair equivocation, but the PTI is much worse. They started off poorly, they ended poorly.
Yeah, so what began, so similar, you find that Jamaat-e-Islam in Bangladesh have at times, for short periods, allied themselves with Awami League, have allied themselves with Bangladesh Nationalist Party, have compromised, have kind of for political favor and political posturing and for political benefit, have taken certain positions. That's no stain on the likes of Maulana Dilwar Hussain Sayyidi, rahimahullah, and others. Sometimes there has to be a separation between the preachers and the clerics of the movement and the actual political figureheads, So 2008, 2009, she came into power, and the next 5 years was the consolidation period. In 2013, Hifazat Islam, which is the largest Deobandi, pretty much apolitical, politically quietist group, they had a peaceful sit-in in Shapla Square in Dhaka. This was in response to caricatures that were shown during a secular Shabag protest by nationalists and secularists in Bangladesh. So this Deobandi group called Hifazat Islam, very large, one of the largest in the country, generally apolitical, had a peaceful sit-in, and they wanted to basically make any kind of insult or attack against the Prophet ﷺ outlawed and criminalized within the constitution. Hasina, in the night, managed to, the official death toll is 60 or 70, but the actual number on the ground amongst those of the victims and those Tulab al-Ilm and Maulanas that were present, they were primarily madrasa students and teachers, is in the hundreds. Again, police, rapid action battalion, killed in the night. By Fajr time, they're buried roadside or left in the roadside. 2013, 2015 was also a critical period where she utilized and weaponized the International Crimes Tribunal. This is a kangaroo court that she pretty much set up and weaponized to eliminate her political opposition leaders.
And what about Bangladesh?
What about you carry on saying that, so the message gets driven home that, like I said, the aesthetics and the reality of our life isn't, and everyday society for Bangladesh and Pakistanis can't be that different, you know. So she set up,
and honestly, the best cooks in Pakistan are Bangladeshi. So
yeah,
there they are. So there's just a side note, just a little distraction. There's a significant community that was left over that they couldn't go back, or they couldn't migrate, or because of work reasons they stayed.
They were primarily in Karachi, right?
Primarily in Karachi. The primary occupation that they enjoy is as cooks and chefs.
And the hospitality sector is theirs in Karachi, I know.
And people used to fight over who gets to hire the Bengali cook. Yeah, that was just a side note. But anyway, sorry for the really stupid distraction.
It's sad that they're more sought after than the Biharis that were left in Bangladesh after 71.
Oh, what a nightmare! What a nightmare!
It's a shame that they were not reintegrated or revalued back into
Pakistan. Pakistan had multiple opportunities. Did you know that to
of course they did, but they chose not to.
The Pakistani management has been a nightmare in terms of its of being any sort of poster child for Islam or pan-Islamism. The Pakistani deep state has always disappointed. They've had multiple opportunities to repatriate the Bihari community and give them citizenship. In fact, a lot of the Bengali leftovers that we have, a lot of them don't have their passports still.
Same with Biharis. I think Biharis are given a much harder deal. From what I heard is that the Bengali community in Karachi are a bit more established.
They are a bit more
than the Biharis are in Bangladesh, the ones that were left over.
I suspect as the oppressors, we didn't have such a harsh memory of outsiders. So Bengalis assimilated just fine. Not in the legal framework, but just culturally, people didn't have a problem with it. But I think the other way around, you can be sympathetic to the vehement sort of opposition that you might have on an Awami level. The governments are going to screw up regardless. There's no paperwork coming through on either side. But the population having certain sentiments, it's understandable, I suspect.
How close do you think Pakistan's deep state is to the United States or its interests?
So Pakistan used to, at no point in its history, has had a non-aligned position like India has had. Pakistan, with the death of Quaid-e-Azam, Liaquat Ali Khan came into power, and he did 2 tours of Canada, and one of Canada and one of the United States, and it was scheduled to be a week-long visit of both countries. It ended up being 2 months. And he did it on, I think it was it Truman or FD? I think it was Truman, on his personal plane, and the idea was that we would posture to the West that, Russia's right there, China's right there, but our loyalties ultimately lie with you, so take care of us. And that's mostly been Pakistan's posturing. With Russia, we've had more of a negative relationship with the Afghan war, but with China, we had a steady enough relationship, but it's gone downhill for the past 1 decade. So I'll give you two contrasting examples.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go. So Henry Kissinger, his meeting with Mao was facilitated by Pakistan. That was one point in time when we were that well connected with these two, and we had a balancing act. So there was a special airstrip built in the northern regions of Pakistan to facilitate a military plane coming in, bringing in Henry Kissinger, and then taking him to Mao, and then having that historical meeting. And with Musharraf onwards, we've had a total policy of bowing down, whether it be domestic policy with the sex and gender stuff, whether it be the Afghan border. So the Afghan border historically for 4,000 years has been one contiguous territory all the way down to the Attock River, at least, if not the Indus, from Afghanistan down here. But during Imran Khan's reign and before as well, we started an operation of putting up a man-made fence across the Durand line, which is impossible. But we did it because the Americans paid for it. So we're in deep. We're one of the few countries that provided small arms to the Ukraine. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
So the way in which Pakistan's deep state is whatever spectrum or percentage or levels you think it is or believe it to be, is intertwined with the interests of the US within the region, it is exactly the same in Bangladesh and India, if not more. If not more, because of how much we have to geopolitically rely on India in terms of imports and exports and border security and what comes in and out of Bangladesh.
Right.
So the same way in which the US and its interests is intertwined with the Pakistani deep state, it is very much the same with India and Bangladesh.
It's unfortunate.
In fact, it's more so because it's easier to infiltrate, because there is already a 7 to 10% Hindu population of Bangladesh. We already know that there are raw agents embedded within state apparatuses within Bangladesh. We already know there are pro-Indian elements within various government bodies of Bangladesh. This is not a rumor. This is not hearsay. This is something that's known. It's just something that's known.
Right.
So given that reality, the way in which the current Hasina government succumbs to and serves Indian interests is also something very important that our viewers and our brothers and sisters outside of Bangladesh need to be made aware of. But what we were discussing is how she's consolidated that power between 2009 to 2014. So she utilized the International Crimes Tribunal to basically eliminate political opposition. So we had the hanging of Dilwar Hussain Sayyidi. No, Abdul Qadir Mullah. Dilwar Hussain Sayyidi was given lifetime, and then he passed away in prison last year. We had, in August 2013, Jamaat-e-Islam was deregulated. So they had to basically, could not take part in general elections anymore, right? Not banned as an organization, but they were banned from participating as a political party in general elections. Now you cannot stand as Jamaat-e-Islam anywhere for any elections. You have to stand as independent.
Right. And what about Bangladesh?
It's the same. That is the same in Bangladesh.
Right.
That's the same in Bangladesh. We had other heads killed. Let me give you some names here. I had Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhry, who was a member of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. We had Ali Ahsan Mujahid from Jamaat-e-Islam. So these are senior figureheads. You know, Dilwar Hussain Sayyidi, rahimahullah, is perhaps one of the most renowned and well-known clerics and preachers to have come from Bangladesh, who was well connected to the ulama of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and other parts of the Muslim majority world. He's someone whose bayan and wazis people you should listen to and should get translated. He was given a lifetime prison sentence and he died. Abdul Qadir Mullah and these are very senior figureheads. Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhry is a very senior figure of the BNP. She used the International Crimes Tribunal to eliminate popular political opposition leaders. And that was basically to flex and tell the people that if I can do this with impunity, with ease, what do you think is going to happen to those who are lower and lesser in esteem to the ones that I've hung?
What about how do people like Mamoon? Where does Mamoon al-Haq fit into this? How do people like him exist with the strict Mamoon al-Haq? You know Mamoon?
Yes.
How do these kinds of characters get to sort of circumnavigate the oppressive sort of? And I'm not doubting any of this. I am fully aware of the situation in Bangladesh. But it fascinates me to no end. How does a character like Mamoon give open speeches in Dhaka and talk about the two nation theory and all of these sorts of? Is it that they would lionize this character if they were to be attacked? I'm individualizing this case, not just to Mamoon. I'm just saying generally these kinds of characters. Is this a sort of very careful game of cat and mouse that the government is playing, or do you think there's something deeper with these kinds of characters?
I think the Hasina government or regime, they move based on what is a perceived threat to her regime.
Right.
She thinks you are a plausible, practical, logistical threat that could lead to strikes, that could lead to coup attempts, that could lead to, in both Bangladesh and Pakistan, banned Islamic political parties like Hizb ut-Tahrir, who are also banned in the UK now. They were involved in coup attempts, right? I think they came much closer in Pakistan than they did in Bangladesh.
They did.
Yeah. So the point here is her regime will only act upon those calls and movements that she deems to be an actual threat, a logistical threat, someone who can actually mobilize numbers, someone who can actually threaten students and their legitimacy on student campuses and so forth.
So the idea is not to elevate someone who is not a logistical threat by cracking down on them. And the idea is to wait and see if they can have an actual, they have a potent sort of.
That is my hunch. At the end of the day,
it's a fair hypothesis. It's a perfectly fair hypothesis.
Because a ruler and a regime that has a track record of stamping down and quelling any type of logistical and practical opposition to her, whether that's in the terms of strikes, popular protests, or anything else, boycotts, or embarrassing her during key state visits by key leaders, when Modi comes, when Western leaders come, wherever it may be, she sees it as, if they pose a threat, then I will stamp down. Someone who speaks but may not have the pull that can permeate into actual action on the streets on a grassroots level, they may allow them to just yap on, right? Or even at times use them to say that, well, this person, we allow this person, yeah? So you can't turn around and say we're that autocratic and we censor dissent. He's allowed to speak. These are just arguments and theories I'm putting out there.
Fair enough. Pakistanis tend to find their respite with the judiciary. Is there a branch of government or a department within the state where you find general opposition has infiltrated fairly well enough, like the police? I doubt the police. The civil services, I also doubt this, and the military as well. Where is it? The media? Is it the media fraternity? Is it entertainment? Is it academe? Where is the opposition mostly based out of?
I would say the opposition was based out of student protests, right? That Islamically, no, but you're talking about from official bodies. Where is there actually stately oppositional balance or balancing checking powers? Sadly, it is very little to none across the body. You may find pockets of it within the media, pockets of it within the media, though the vast majority of the state-run media and state-affiliated media are basically mouthpieces for Hussain and the Awami League, and it used to alternate when the BNP used to come in power and so on. Now, in terms of the judiciary, the Supreme Court, the High Court, and all of this stuff, at least in Pakistan, there is some semblance, right? Or at least a veneer of this being here to keep those in power in check. Sadly, over the course of 15 years, if there was any scope for that in Bangladesh, that has been removed as a result of how she has solidified her power between 2009 to 2014. And from my opinion, the mistake that BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, made in boycotting the 2014 elections, that was a huge mistake. It was a huge mistake in the same way it could be argued in the same way that the Freedom and Justice Party in Egypt, Muhammad Morsi rahimahullah's party, the Ikhwan al-Muslimin basically in Egypt,
yes,
before they were officially banned, they had an election which they could have participated in, but they didn't, so because they didn't want to give legitimacy to how transparent and fair the elections were going to be. The same argument was presented by Bangladesh Nationalist Party and Jamaat-e-Islam at the time, that we're not going to give legitimacy to this kangaroo democracy, this kangaroo election. And basically that was the final nail in the coffin. She had already eliminated their political heads and their popular leaders. She had already weaponized the International Crimes Tribunal. She had already even sent out a message to the apolitical political quietists like Hifazat Islam, the largest Deobandi group in the country. And that's how she solidified her power. And since then, gone.
Brother Dilly, when you have that kind of a situation when there's no outlet for public pressure, and then you have on your hands the student protest, which is on the surface level, it's about quotas, but it's obviously not that skin deep. It's about this whole structure of oppression where there's no political outlets. These people don't get to have their voices heard. They don't feel represented in government. When you have this kind of a pressure cooker situation, is there a peaceful resolution out of this, or do you think Bangladesh is going towards something more violent, let's say, politically?
I would like for there to be an agreement, one which benefits the students that have been protesting and those that have been killed and seriously injured, and one that is actually just unfair to the people of Bangladesh. I have always said this, and I say this to Awami League supporters and members, even within my own family. That's another crazy thing that people don't understand.
Mm.
In Bangladesh families, even within one family, you could have BNP, Awami League, and maybe even Jamaat Islam.
The family WhatsApp groups are crazy, I can imagine.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. So I will say this. I will say this to those who are loyal to the regime and loyal to the party. May not even be for ideological reasons. May not even be for any other reason except that their forefathers, or for whatever reason, they joined it in universities and colleges and schools and so forth. If the accusation against West Pakistan during the liberation or the independence wars that they killed our intellectuals, they rounded them up and they killed our intellectuals. They killed hundreds of them, if not thousands. So what do you think you are doing when you are using lethal force and shooting with AK-47s and shotguns and Chinese rifles at unarmed protesters, the future thinkers and engineers of your nation? The nation that you fought, your forefathers fought, that you're dying to give 30% to their descendants, you're now here basically doing what you claimed the oppressors and the occupiers did back in 71. You are killing your students, you're killing your academics. Now, there are some elements within the Hasina regime whose thinking is that this is just the periodic letting off of steam before there has to be some bloodletting from the government before they recognize who's actually in power and then things resume for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Before 2024, the last protests were two major kind of symbolic protests were the anti-traffic protests of 2018. The anti-traffic protests of 2018 were when students protested against traffic laws that resulted in students being killed in traffic crossing the roads. You know, buses and coaches and cars and rickshaws and baby taxis and CNGs running over students and killing students just crossing the busy roads of Dhaka. Students were, but Chatra League crackdown, RAB crackdown, dozens were killed, sisters were molested by regime loyalists. 2018 was also when the protests led to the revocation of the quota system that we're talking about. Now, when we say, do you think it's going to lead to something greater? People take that in a different way, my dear brother. Some will say, you guys, you Dariwala, Mullah, and religious folk, you guys want these pan-Islamists. All you want is revolution.
No.
But revolution and insurrection, but never have nothing to offer. Or you get the others who say, well, look, these are students that are protesting. It is non-partisan. To caricature them in any other way would be unjust to them. That's why I'm even mindful, as someone who would regard themselves as within the spheres of Islamic activism. I would not say the entire student movement is Islamic, or even that it is the nucleus of the movement. It would be unfair and unjust. These are students from all walks of life that literally just want a fair opportunity in an already crowded and overpopulated country. Do you understand? An already corrupt country. But Hasina uses the quota system to preserve the regime. And what it will lead to at the moment, is it more violence or a negotiation of the terms? Well, I've read the 9 demands. Let me read the 9 demands out to you.
Please.
Prime Minister Hasina must apologize to the nation for the killing of students. Number 2, the resignation of the Home Minister Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal and Road Transport and Brigades Minister Obaidul Qadir. Number 3, dismissal of Deputy Inspector General, Police Commissioner and Superintendent of Police in areas where students were killed. Number 4, the resignation of Vice Chancellor of Dhaka University, Jahangir University and Rajshahi University. They singled out these 3 universities because those authorities colluded with state actors and allowed police and loyalist thugs to enter university premises and dormitories. Number 5, arrest and prosecute police officers and ruling party thugs accused of student murders and killings. Number 6, the families of the deceased and the injured and the grieving to be compensated. Number 7, prohibition of partisan student politics on all campuses, what we spoke about earlier. All schools, colleges, universities, and student halls should be opened up again for students. Number 9, lastly, guarantee that students' participation in the current protests or any protest does not cause any harm to their academic future and employability. Look at those demands. Those are fair demands. Fair demands that shouldn't lead to the killing of anyone, right? Open our colleges and universities and schools again. Guarantee us that when we take part in a cause, that would not hinder our already disadvantaged probability of getting a job. Stop the partisan politics on campuses. This is leading to literal tyranny on campuses. Yeah? Apologize take some responsibility for the deaths that have taken place. Fire the people that we believe to be responsible for them, involved in the police, the army, RAB, and so forth. These are fair demands. How many of them do I think will be delivered through any kind of meaningful negotiation? Maybe a handful. The opening of the institutions, maybe some nominal sweet talk about those who were behind this will be brought to justice and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think the vast majority of these demands will be met. I think there will be further violence. And it will literally be a case of, will the violent crackdown subdue and eventually censor this popular movement? Sadly, history has proven that the more violent the government gets, the regime gets in cracking down in any of these causes, whether, I repeat, whether they are secular or religious or otherwise, what can the people do? What, are we calling for, is the notion of it something like the Arab Spring in South Asia? No. But there has to be a point where, at least in the case of Bangladesh, the government has to be like, we can't kill any more of our students. We can't kill any more student protesters, right? It's just recently got into the attention of the UN. Otherwise, the UN didn't really care much. Because why? Because Bangladesh, sadly, doesn't have the international status and positioning in that region like two nuclear weapons like nations like Pakistan and India has. Sadly, for whatever reason, Bangladesh doesn't gain that attention or importance from Western nations and UN for it to even be an international issue of discussion. Like Imran Khan's arrest and the coup that removed him was a huge talking point for Western media outlets. The events of Bangladesh doesn't receive as such. Do I want there to be less killing and oppression and a more amicable conclusion to this? Of course. But it appears that the Hasina government and regime is not able to do this. She has helicopters out. She has snipers out. This is not a regime that has a track record of sitting down with people who peacefully oppose her policies. This is a government that I've just explained to you in this podcast has a long track record of brutally and violently cracking down on any opposition to her regime.
So just to recap, we've discussed the chronology by which the Hasina regime has established itself in all spheres of Bengali life, Bangladeshi life, sorry. From the military to civil bureaucracy to the judiciary to the media, and I'm sure leading in industry as well. And there is sort of a split between the soul of the Bangladeshi people, where they can just nominally be supporting the Awami League, or they could nominally be supporting the Nationalist League, or with the Jamaat Islami. And these protests, amidst all of that chaos, are seen by the state as this release valve, as the sort of the junction at which we can shed some blood, show everyone who's boss, and then move on for the next 3, 4, 5, 6, however many years we can keep the racket going.
Papa, wait, John, listen to this. We're not even talking about the everyday stuff. Yeah, we're talking about the big ticket stuff that's taking place. The everyday thuggery, the everyday intimidation, the everyday corruption, the everyday nepotism that exists within every facet of Bangladeshi society. When you said to me earlier that it can't just be the quota system that people are protesting against. Of course it's not. It's gone way beyond that now. Because, in the West, we have a term, cost of living. In Bangladesh, it's cost of surviving. It's not cost of living. It's cost of surviving. The fact that the average Bangladeshi eats one meal a day, if that even with a strong economy and a growing GDP, who actually benefits from that? When we talk about this, even when people talk about India has a strong economy, do you think that average Indian is benefited from the strength of that economy? Of course not. In the same case in Bangladesh, if you Google Bangladesh economy in recent years, it has been strengthening. Its GDP has been increasing. The economy has been stabilizing, and it has been flexing itself as an emerging economic power within the Southeast Asia region. But the average awam, rickshaw driver, the average farmer, the average peasant, the average student, the average anyone, how much of that do they see? How much of that do they benefit? Little to none. So it's about the corruption. It's about the cost of surviving. It's about the unemployment. It's about the poverty. It's the fact that Bangladesh are just fed up of Hasina after 15 years. Yeah, they're just fed up, right? And there's large swathes, tens of millions who oppose her. But I'd be lying if I said that she doesn't enjoy the support of a strong constituency within Bangladeshi society. And that's the saddening, disappointing reality.
And what is it? Is it an older generation or younger people too?
Does nepotism benefit the old and the young? It benefits both. So,
and is it people who would describe as culturally, in terms of their consumptions, more libertine? Those types tend to support Hasina, because we had a similar situation with the Musharraf regime, where you had parts of your civil society in Pakistan, liberal-leaning individuals, like very classically neoliberal types, the gender and sex types. I would describe them as libertine sort of individuals.
libertarians.
Not even libertarians, like libertine, more like upper class sort of hedonists. Is that the sort of the power base that she has? Upper class hedonists who send their kids abroad to study, or maybe running some kind of industry. Yeah.
Oh yes. There is a strong.
Do you guys have defenses as well? We have housing, elite housing schemes that are run by the military, where the elite and their families reside. Do you have those in Bangladesh?
Okay, so I think Pakistan, the Pakistani military's authority and open authority within Pakistani society is far more open and is probably more significant than it is in Bangladesh. The Bangladeshi military has power. It has moments in history where it has removed a civilian government, put both Hasina and Khaleda Zia under house arrest, and we've had caretaker military governments that ruled with curfew, and there was some level of stability, but brutal crackdown on in terms of different aspects of society, from everyday businessmen and laborers to political opposition. It's not a good time when the military is in power, but they have the authority to come in when they feel that they need to. That said, there are cantonments. There are those that are Western educated, that like particular lifestyles, that live uppity lifestyles in their little bubbles, in their cantonments. But the point of the matter is, these are not people that are affected, These are not the people that we're talking about. We're talking about someone who could be your uncle, your cousin, your friend's brother, someone who you've grown up with in the village, someone you've grown up in the shed, that you've gone to college with, that you've gone to university, that is also a loyalist, that will talk regime talking points to defend their privileges that they have in terms of openly allying with the Awami League. It is that partisan. It is that partisan.
Is it more of a cultural default, or now is it directly like I have lines of benefit with the state? So is it a cultural default, or is it a direct sort of I get X, I get Y, I get Z, therefore, my uncle is in whatever department and he pays the bills? And is it more direct, or is it sort of a cultural default to align with Hasina?
Mirabai, I think there's a spectrum of support for the Hasina regime. You get those who benefit directly, whether politically, financially, economically, locally, regionally. There are those who benefit merely from affiliation. So the fact that you could be a businessman, and for taxation reasons, for whatever reasons, you need to be close with whoever the ruling party of the day is. Not necessarily that you are even an ideologue, right? You will sadly even get religious folk who will find some justification for what Hasina is doing. It is not unheard of or uncommon to have aesthetically outwardly looking men of faith, imams and scholars defending and justifying what she's doing, in the same way that the Sisi regime, in the same way that other governments and autocratic governments have done from the breadth of the Muslim majority world.
Yes.
So for me to say, definitely what you've described, that constituency exists, for sure. They are pretty much part of the furniture. But I'm talking about how deeply entrenched this patronage system is. It goes from your village union election to your district election.
It's more akin to what we have in Sindh, the province particularly ruled by the People's Party. It's had one party rule. So down to the molecular level, their society will get civil employments, with benefits, with
That
pensions.
sounds very similar to the,
Yeah, Sindh has that. Sindh has that where it's just in their DNA now. It's almost like a religious sentiment. They have huge mazars for the Bhutto family.
let me give you an example, yeah? Just directing my family. My father used to be a member and a supporter of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. My Dada, may Allah have mercy on him, his
Amen.
father was generally apolitical, but he was from the Naqshbandi Tariqa. So he was a religious aesthetic man. My Dada's brothers, especially my Chota Dada, he is Bangladesh Nationalist Party. My Chacha, my dad's younger brother is Awami League.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
the black sheep.
Yes. I have my wife's Taya, Awami League. Within one family, I have my Dada's cousins, first cousins, Jamaati Islam. Wallahi, I have this diversity within the immediate family.
What about expats? Are expats, like, with Pakistani expats, they lean a certain way for the PTI, whether that be in Europe or in the Americas. You have the expats lean a certain way. Has any of these political parties been successfully able to bank on that expat support? Because in Pakistan, the expat community tends to play a big role because of the foreign remittances. So our expats in the Middle East, in Europe, in the Americas. Does Bangladesh have a similar sort of component of there being a vibrant, strong expat community, or is it unfortunate? No.
No, there is a strong expat community. Let's talk about some of the countries and the events that have taken place since. Let's talk about the UAE. 54 Bangladeshis arrested for merely posting in support.
I have not heard this. This is insane. Is this in the past couple of weeks?
In the past couple of weeks, 54 Bangladeshis were arrested and detained by the UAE authorities for supporting the student protests in Bangladesh. So
Wow.
there's that. We know that the Bangladeshi government has sent an email out to all heads of missions from the foreign secretary, telling them intelligence gathering who is criticizing us in the diaspora communities, primarily in Australia, Britain being the number one, Britain, Canada, the United States, and Australia. These four countries mainly, but as well as other parts of the Gulf.
And what about Bangladesh?
There you go.
We've had that. We've had the email forwards, and the even retired military officers. They all got the circular. If you,
I've got this.
Subhanallah. Yeah. We've had similar. Yeah. At this point, guys, I think we have to reunite. I think we're the same. And let's invite the British back. Let's reunite the continent. No, it's ridiculous.
25th of July 2024, the Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh sent the following email to all heads of missions. So this is sent to embassies and so forth. And this is to also Awami League supporters, party members, associates, donors, and everything. This is from embassies to all levels, to all heads of missions. And basically, in short, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points were made, and this is primarily to do with intelligence gathering, names of who's criticizing the government and supporting the protesters. What efforts are you doing to counter those things? Are there any friendly or neutral media, local or national, that are willing to give the Bangladeshi government's perspective, and all these kind of things, right? So they will only do this because they know how strong and influential and outspoken the diasporic communities are, especially, if not namely, in Bangladesh, in Britain and Australia. And I know in America and Canada there are Bangladeshi communities there. I don't know how outspoken and active they are in terms of the affairs, the domestic political affairs of Bangladesh. But in terms of Britain, it's a bit of a double-edged one. Sylhetis live in a bit of a bubble. Sylhetis, who make up 90% of Bangladeshis in Britain, they live in a bit of a socioeconomic bubble. We are third, fourth generation. Our forefathers came in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s. They didn't plan on coming here. They came as economic migrants. They decided to stay, got married, brought their wives over, had children. We've been here since the 1960s or 70s. We live in a bubble in the same way that Kashmiris and those from Jhelum and other parts of Punjab, when they go back to Pakistan, they're in a bit of a socioeconomic bubble. right?
Yeah.
That's on the one hand, we are somewhat privileged.
Who won?
I think the brothers won. The ones who are supporting the protest.
Mashallah, brother.
Because if you ask me what is the general persuasion and inclination of the diaspora community, if they are religious, if they tend to be religiously conservative, they're either Deobandi or Jamaati. If it's the really secular anti-Pakistan type, then they will tend to be Awami League supporters.
Right.
Pro-India, anti-Pakistan, socially conservative but not religiously conservative, secular in their thinking and their politics. These people tend to be supporters. And I think that those who are against Hasina and her government and her party and her policies, I think they certainly outnumber those who are her supporters, especially in the UK at least. I can't speak for Canada and Australia.
I mean, we're not going to reach a resolution point anytime soon, I suspect. And then you said it perfectly. It's an escalation ladder of how violent can the government get and how long can the students last, how much popular support can they muster, given that the internet is shut down sporadically, given that there's violent crackdown, given that there within civil society you have the youth wing of the in plain clothes, going around torturing and kidnapping students and doing all of this subterfuge for the state. And even within the expat community, do you think that Bangladesh has the right circumstances in terms of demographics, in terms of the financial situation, GDP per capita? Do you think it's ripe? And I'm not saying this, and I think you tackled it very appropriately when you said, there's a very genuine complaint about religious types wanting some sort of violent revolution, and I think especially after the Arab Spring experiment. I think we should be careful of that kind of violence, because it leaves the society open to external engineering. And here the engineer is right at your border. It's India, and it could lead to even worse and fragmented situation in Bangladesh. What I'm saying is, in the current peaceful and within the democratic framework sense, can the protests thrive or survive? And can they? And I know you're cynical about this. You've reiterated that point that maybe one or two requests will be entertained. Can this turn into a wider democratic move that is bipartisan?
So your question has 2 points here. The issue is, in 2018, what was mostly peaceful protests led to the revocation of the quota system. Let's not forget that. In 2018, this very quota system that the students are protesting against was revoked, and it was largely due to peaceful protests. So we know that results can be made, results can be delivered. We can have positive and durable outcomes to protests and student-led protests. The issue is that in 2018, more than 1,000 students weren't killed, 8,000 arrests weren't made, more than 15,000 weren't injured, helicopters went out, snipers went on roofs, people weren't being kidnapped and abducted from hospitals. So I'm now wondering, how far does the Hasina regime herself think has she gone? Does she believe that she has overcommitted in terms of the way in which the state, police and army and RAB and the Mukhabarat or intelligence services equivalent, the NSI, has she gone too far to now go back to a revocation? I don't know, possibly. But the next aspect of your question is, do I believe that the variables are ripe, that there could be some meaningful change within the democratic framework that's currently in Bangladesh? The long answer of that is no, of course not. Because we know that these systems weren't put in place for justice to prevail. We know that these systems that we have in place, these state mechanisms and machinations that we have, is not there to benefit the awam public. We know this. For me to say that is for me to say that there are processes within the democratic system of Bangladesh that allows such changes to take place. I do not believe that to be the case. I am yet to hear of a successful mass opposition to a government policy that was changed through radical government policy reforms. Yes, tweaks have been made. Yes, certain attempts at bills and changes and amendments were pulled back. But I can't sit here and say to you that the existing democratic framework would allow such radical or meaningful change. What I will say that if this is what we are dealing with, if this is a system in which we have in place, we must exhaust what that system allows, whilst also thinking outside of the box. And I think that applies to Pakistan as well. In fact, that applies to most Muslim majority countries.
No, I wanted to reiterate my point. That's exactly what I was asking was, are the given circumstances with regards to the population, are they ripe for some sort of out of the box solution? Because given that the current system is not going to be serviceable for them, and it has not been for the last 30, 40, however many odd years, do you see any sort of talks about rethinking, reimagining Bangladeshi society, the way the political structures are, or is it just surface level at this point? Because from going from traffic protests to this, it's a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal in terms of the public consciousness.
No, but let's also be very serious here. In terms of maybe that wasn't a fair representation from me. Since 1971, since the very founding of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, there have always been protests, hartals, strikes, and popular movements who want a Bangladesh which they believe their forefathers or themselves fought for. This is a proudly Muslim nation, Muslim majority country, who is proud of their Islam, who they believe in their psyche at least, whether it be India or Pakistan, that they want a political destiny that benefits them. The sad reality of nation state asabiya is that it is very difficult to think outside of that box, because the pan-Islamic ummatic thinking is something that requires some self-sacrifice. It requires you to understand that sometimes things will not always benefit me, and maybe things shouldn't always benefit me. There is a wider picture. That perhaps if things are better elsewhere, that it may have a knock-on effect here in the generations to come. That thinking requires conditioning. It requires patience. It requires convincing. It requires articulation. It requires those who are actual role models and enactors of it. And Bangladesh and Pakistan were historically never short of these type figures or movements. That said, there have been, that's why I kept repeating, the regime response to causes, whether it's Islamic or secular, whether it's the caricatures of the Prophet ﷺ in Paris, whether it's attacks on Islam, whether it's Palestine or Gaza, whether it's road traffic, whether it's the quota system, whatever it is, the regime cracks down in such a violent and brutal way, irrespective. But what this shows is that Bangladesh till this day is still trying to find its own political destiny in defining a state and a society which it believes was founded for the benefit of the Bangladeshi people. But in reality, what we've had is a two-state, now one-state, crony state, which is autocratic, which is dictatorial, which is corrupt to the core, and which is far from Islam. And that's whether you even consider Islam to be part of the equation in this future destiny of Bangladesh. Even that is a debate in and of itself. What role does Islam play in Bangladesh?
And what is the role that Islam, do you think, will play in Bangladesh?
I think Islam is intertwined and is an integral defining attribute of the Bangladeshi nation. I think the reason why there is some level of distrust or maybe even cynicism is that Pakistan was founded to be the land for the park, yeah, a safe home for those to practice Islam and be Muslim, away from what was believed to be an oppressive Hindu majority country. Given that that was the project then, that was the thinking then, that was the supposed ideology then, that didn't pan out. So maybe we need to move with the religion discussion with some caution because of the historical baggage. That if Islam will play a role in a future Bangladesh, we can't repeat the mistakes of 48, 47, and 71, and those kind of things. So I think Bangladeshis at all levels are deep inside are sick of corruption, are sick of a lack of access to basic necessities, especially the poor, whether they're in inner cities or in the rural areas. The average Bangladeshi is surviving with one meal a day, bro. Do you understand? So life's hard. Generally, life is hard. And these are Bangladeshis who are saying this with an economy which is currently stronger than Pakistan's.
Gee, yes.
People are just struggling. They're just fed up and they're sick of it. It's just a case of for how long? This boiling kettle, for how long? When does it tip? And when it tips, what does that mean? Does it mean the military comes in? Does it mean that there will be some attempt at free and fair elections? Does it mean that there will be regime change, military coup, armed insurrection, revolution? We don't know. We ask these same questions, as I'm sure many Pakistanis ask these questions, as many in the Arab world ask these questions, right? What is the destiny? What is the future for us locally and as an ummah internationally? What is the direction? What is it? What is it that we're seeking? And what is it that benefits us and affects us here at home? I asked my dad when he got back from Bangladesh, how many people are talking about Gaza in Bangladesh? He goes, some are and some aren't. He goes, how do you expect those who are trying to get a meal on their table to worry about Gaza in the most selfish of reasons? And I was saddened to hear that.
No, it's true. It's true in Pakistan as well.
He goes, tell me that average rickshaw driver or CNG driver or baby taxi driver, the guy who's working to make 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000 taka a day, which is not even £5 by English money. Do you think he has time to think of Gaza? Do you think he has time to think of the Uyghurs? My father's telling me this. He goes, but those who are religiously inclined, who are pan-Islamic in their thinking, they are there. Don't worry, those Muslims are there. They don't necessarily have to be a majority for the Ummah to wake up. I think that's another thing I want to drive home. For the Ummah's revival, whatever that means in worldly sense, it doesn't require that the vast majority of the Ummah has to have a pan-Islamic thinking. It just means key people and key institutions and key stakeholders need to have that thinking.
Ahl Nusra.
Yeah, and that thinking, whoever is Ahl Nusra, Ahl, whatever they are. Yeah, they need to, so long as they're there, it's fine.
You heard it here first from the UK's very own, the only Bengal tiger that they have, Dilly Hussain. MashaAllah.
There's many.
The most vocal Bengal tiger that they have. Have you seen one? Have you been to Bangladesh? Have you seen one? Like in real life?
Oh, a Bengal tiger?
Yeah.
So Bengal tiger is generally in resort jungles and forests. I've not seen one. But we have had cases of panthers and like leopards that have come from the wild. And they've somehow got into the bazaar areas. They were killed with sticks and stuff eventually.
Yeah, that happens. That happens here as well.
But I think tiger attacks are more common in India. Right. But look, just to wrap up from my end, Jazakallah khair for having me on. We discussed so much, and I know this conversation could have easily carried on for hours. But the situation in Bangladesh is a dire one, my dear brothers and sisters, in Pakistan and beyond. And the duty that lies upon you is to speak on behalf of your brothers and sisters.
Inshallah.
Bangladeshis always take to the streets for Kashmir. You will always find Bangladeshis take to the streets for many Islamic causes. You know, on the one hand, the poor may not have time to think about the Ummah's issues, but those who do think about the Ummah's issues make it known. And Bangladesh does that repeatedly. So we want from our Pakistani brothers and sisters within Pakistan and the diaspora communities.
Especially within the diaspora communities, I think it's the responsibility of the Pakistani diaspora community to reach out to their Bengali brethren and have some sort of dialogue with them.
Definitely. And I think that if there's any reservation that you think that you will not be welcomed or that this assistance or this brotherhood wouldn't be appreciated, it very, very much would be. Because I know there's this reservation, like I know it exists, that some Pakistanis want to do good and get close, but they don't want to because they will still be, no matter what they do, they'll always be seen as a traitor or a son of a traitor or a descendant of a traitor or an oppressor or an occupier. Don't. Most Bangladeshis appreciate the brotherhood and love.
Inshallah. No, Brother Dilly has promised us that he'll try and come to Pakistan and we'll feed him our inferior Rasgulla. We have really bad Rasgulla from we have places which will claim that they're from the 1920s or whatever. They'll be called Dhaka. They'll be called Dhaka sweets or whatever, and but we'll try. We'll feed you some Rasgullas.
So speak on behalf of your brothers and sisters, even if it's a mere retweet or a share of a post, or engage and connect.
I think pen pals would be best. Reach out to Bangladeshis on forums, religious or otherwise. Connect, make friends with them.
And that's it, because I would say to you, so I've told Bangladeshis that those of you who have members or relatives that are part of Awami League or part of the army or part of the police, speak to them, tell them that what's happening is wrong, convince them, change public opinion privately and so forth. I can't say that to Pakistanis because you can barely get a word in edgeway into the minds of those who rule over you. So there's no point me saying to you to speak to the Pakistani army about.
No, we should. No, you shouldn't feel, nothing is too small. You would be surprised how easy it is, but by 1-2 degrees of separation. Anyone who has the convenience of the internet, of the English language, if you're listening to this, automatically you're in that top 10% of privilege within the South Asian community. So the next step would be, with 1 or 2 degrees of separation, you can reach the important people within your state, inshallah. You'll be surprised how easy it is. And in putting in a good word for your Bangladeshi brothers who are talking about a potential reconciliation culturally across the border, these are all good conversation points. These are all good starting points.
For sure. Jazakallah khair for having me on the Welcome. Minds.
Thank you, brother.
Keep the Muslims of Bangladesh in your du'as, and likewise the Muslims of Pakistan and also will be in our du'as.
Pakistan needs double the du'as right now. I mean, at least your economy is going somewhere. Thank you, brother Dilly. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallahu feek. Assalamu alaikum.